Former President Trump is set to formally accept the Republican nomination tonight. It'll be his third time and not much of a surprise. So you might be wondering, why do political parties even hold these events? What's the point? Well, Brad Mielke, host and managing editor of ABC's daily podcast, Start Here, is giving us an interesting history lesson.
The National Convention. The pomp, the circumstance, the balloons. It's a far cry from what conventions used to be known as, bare-knuckle political brawls. A party-sponsored Thunderdome. Many men enter, only one man leaves. So, how did we get here? Well, let's go back to the beginning. So, back in the day, George Washington says he's not running for president again. All of his allies look around and go, wait, how do we decide which of us is next? Well, they have a convention, an internal party vote decided by delegates in a room. For more than a century, this is how it goes. A bunch of dudes whispering to each other, hey, how about this guy? Well, I don't know, the room doesn't seem to love him. How about this guy? What's wild about this period in history is the candidates themselves don't even show up to conventions. Campaigning for yourself is considered, well, kind of tacky. Let the party come to you. This could backfire, though. In 1880, a candidate named John Sherman sent his buddy to give a speech on his behalf. That buddy's name was James Garfield, and convention goers liked him so much, they nominated Garfield instead. Well, in 1932, a nominee felt the need to accept the nomination in person. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was known to have polio, wanted to show he was strong enough to take the job. He said it was absurd to have nominees sit around at home professing ignorance, so against tradition, he arrived in Chicago to put minds at ease. At this point, a new invention has also come onto the scene. No, I'm not talking about the radio. I'm talking about the presidential primary. You know, where regular Americans can actually cast their votes for a party nominee. Several states had primaries in the early 1900s, but they were often known as beauty contests, a way to show your popularity. The convention was still the place where real decisions were made. In 1968, though, that all came crashing down. At the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago, Democrats were without a clear frontrunner. Lyndon Johnson had decided not to run for re-election, and young voters were furious about the Vietnam War. Robert F. Kennedy opposed the war, but he had just been assassinated. The other frontrunner, Eugene McCarthy, also opposed the war, so did this guy, George McGovern. But the delegates in Chicago didn't nominate any of them. Instead, they chose Johnson's vice president, Hubert Humphrey, who supported the war and hadn't won a single contest. As riots raged outside the convention, Democrats realized something had to change. By 1972, the modern primary system was born. Every state would have some kind of nominating contest open to all party members, and state delegations would no longer be made up of just a few power brokers. More transparent votes, fewer backroom deals. The Republican Party followed suit, and since then, state primaries and caucuses have decided the nominees. Conventions are now less about choosing a candidate and more about celebrating the candidate. In Milwaukee, you can expect more choreography than a Bob Fosse number. Now, in more recent years, some candidates have tried to usurp the favorite on the convention floor, hoping for a brokered convention. But in the last half-century, that hasn't worked. Not yet, anyway. But as we've learned from conventions over the years, never say never.
So interesting. Brad Mielke, thanks for that.